Good evening, viewers, and welcome to SLP Town Hall Tuesday. I'm your host, Mondi Lewis. Today, we have three lovely guests with me, and I'm very excited to have them on the panel this evening whilst we discuss education in St. Lucia, especially in this COVID era. So I would like to first introduce Dr. Virginia Poyot, who is our endorsed candidate for Babonneau. Good night, Dr. Poyot.
Good evening, Mondi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very nice to have you. And we have next to her Senator Gideon Ferdinand, who is our endorsed candidate for Micoud South.
Hi, good evening, and good evening to all the viewers and those following us elsewhere.
Yes. And right next to me, I have Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper, the endorsed candidate for Choiseul Saltibus. Good evening, Dr. Prosper.
Good evening, Mondi, and good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Very nice. So we'll get right into it. As we all know, this is the second week of school for most students. Some students didn't have the luxury of attending school on the first day of the academic year. And we know that we continue to see a lot of distress, a lot of parents calling out for assistance. But on the bright side, we see a lot of private citizens stepping up, a lot of organizations stepping up to the plate and really being our brothers keepers at this time. Where the government has failed, persons have stepped in. And I would like to first speak to Dr. Antoine because she has a young daughter who's at school. So maybe she can share the experience of back to school for her daughter.
Well, normally back to school for children is an exciting time. And my daughter is happy to be back at school after being at school as far back as March. They miss their friends, they miss, the environment of school. My daughter in particular missed her physical education classes. And she was like, Mommy, when am I having physical education? And I said, well, you have to ask your teacher, for a timetable. And then she came on Thursday and said, Mommy, I have physical education on Monday. And she was all for it. So on Monday, she was dressed up early for physical education. So you can see our children miss, being out and playing with their friends and, the physical activity because trust me, she gained some weight during COVID and she needs to lose the weight. But she's excited. Her school has the 5-day cycle, so on Friday she had to stay home. I had to get supervision for her. One part she wasn't too happy about. She felt she had too much homework for Friday and over the weekend. So that was a burden for her.
Could you explain what exactly is the 5-day cycle for those of us who don't have children?
Yes, so the children have classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on Friday at the school, this is the time for the teachers to plan and for the janitors to sanitize the school in preparation for Monday.
Okay, thank you for that. And what has been the condition going back to school? What are the procedures that one could expect or there have been in schools going forward?
Well, they have to be in school a bit early because their temperature has to be taken when they get to school. Their hands have to be sanitized before they get into the classroom. So this takes a bit of time because, from my knowledge, the school has one thermometer and the population of the school is about 500 students. And so it is a daunting task for one person to be checking the temperature of each child and ensuring that each child is sanitized. So it appears that we need more resources in the school to expedite that process.
Okay. So Senator Ferdinand, I know you two have some young children. I think they've just gone to Form 1. And what has been your experience as a parent? And you're also a former principal. I mean, you're in a very good position to critique what the government has put forward and what you experience now as a parent.
Yeah, well, first of all, Mondi, I must give a lot of credit to the school administration, the teachers, and the ancillary staff, and everybody at the school who has put their best foot forward to ensure that the children are able to return to school and are comfortable. So with my children, they're excited. Of course, they've missed school and they're moving to a new school, coming out of the primary into the secondary school. They've come home with their little stories about how things are working out. I think they're managing. My concerns are still there, however, because they have a 7-day cycle. And so they have groups alternating, Group A and Group B, and on alternate days, the groups go to school. And on the 7th day of the cycle, the students stay home, and I think there is planning and sanitizing of the school and so on. So, for example, this week, my children are only going to be at school 1 day. That is on Thursday. I think today is day 6, and they're out. The Group A is out. And tomorrow would be day 7, so everybody's going to be home. And Thursday, I think they go back. So you almost have a case where on a given week or during a given week, a child may actually go to school 1 day. And not that, you can blame the school for it, because they're trying to work out a system to give the children enough time. But when you think about the amount of instructional time that is lost, given the conditions, it's still going to be very difficult for any school to implement an entire scheme of work or plan, unit of work in a single term. And the first term is usually the longest,
Yes.
about 13 weeks. And I think it's going to be a challenge. So I have to give credit to the efforts that have been put by the schools. But I still have many concerns, and I think as we go through the discussion tonight, I'm sure some of these concerns will be articulated.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ferdinand. And to you, Dr. Poyot, you've had your pulse in the teaching service with teachers. This is what you have done most of your life. What have you been hearing on the ground? And we know you're in Babonneau doing the work, canvassing. What have you been hearing in terms of the reopening of school from a teacher's point of view? So we've heard from the parents and what their children are experiencing. What have you heard from teachers?
Okay, well, my involvement in education has not been limited to just myself as a teacher and principal. I think it spans over representation of teachers. And the challenge that this reopening of school has posed is a big challenge for teachers in that they have to cope with a completely new arrangement. It's one where they were not used to before. And in fact, the ministry came up with this arrangement with this 3-day, 4-day cycle. And I think people are yet to find out where did they get that model. And sometimes in St. Lucia, we like to stick to what we know or what we have. But I like to measure St. Lucia against regional and international standards. And we must not settle for anything lower than that. And don't say we are small islands, we are developing, and therefore we have to settle for what is below standard. But the teachers are complaining that the materials in schools are inadequate. In fact, luckily, the facilities fee, those parents who could pay, they were able to get these facilities fees. And that is what they are using to actually complement, because the ministry gave them very little bit of, for example, the hand sanitizers. You have the children must wash their hands and wipe their hands. They didn't give them any napkins. So they are using these facilities fee to actually buy these things to put in the school. And they are complaining that they have very long hours in order to monitor these children with the mask. They are on their feet whole day. And especially the kindergartens. The kindergartens cannot keep that mask for too long. And they drop it on the floor. They are mistaken
sharing
whose mask it is. Then they lose it. And it's a lot of drama. So I don't know how long this thing will last, but it is very, very troublesome for teachers.
Yes, and you spoke to the limited resources. We saw a very comprehensive plan, I must say, from the Ministry of Education. But the biggest question was, where is the budget for the implementation of the plan? It's one thing to have a good policy in place, but we're hearing a lot of schools having to to do, goodwill of parents, goodwill of private citizens, coming to really help. Where is the government in all of this? And you know, I've seen from teachers online speaking about the double workload. Is that anybody's experience? I don't know if Senator Gibeon, you still very connected. So maybe you could speak to that. You know, again, we speak about the children, and yes, and I always say children are very resilient, but the teachers now, even those with children, how have they been coping with the limited resources?
Yeah, well, the resources issue has been one that I have spoken about many times, and I've always felt that the human resource base is really what is most important as a developing state. We do not have oil, we do not have some of those other resources, but we do have a good human resource base. And having had 2 Nobel laureates, there's no doubt that St. Lucia's ability to be competitive out there depends on how well you invest in your education. And I've not only been concerned about the dollars and cents, but also how the resources that are allocated to education have been allocated. Now, in a situation where you're going into a post-COVID environment in schools, you have to adapt, and the teachers have been called upon to do that. They are not going home and staying home like the students. They are there every single day, particularly at the secondary school where they have multiple classes and different groups. So while the students alternate, the teachers have to be there every single day, and they also have to manage the students who are at home. They are supposed to be getting work to them via Google Classroom or whatever other medium is there. But my question still remains, to what extent is that going to work when students who are, for example, a child who is in a group A and stays home while the group B is at school, they're expected to be receiving work. The same teacher has to provide work for both those at school and those at home. Now, while we keep talking about the students and the concerns that we have about the students, we also have to keep in mind that the human beings in the school teaching them have their families. They also have concerns with their health, and they have issues. They have to provide the facilitate the learning from the classroom as well as from home. So that requires a tremendous amount of attention and allocation of resources. Now, we cannot say that that the teachers can be effective if we haven't given them. In fact, we cannot measure the effectiveness of the teachers if we haven't given them the tools. So I'm not sure that I've seen anything significantly different at any of the schools since school reopened. That tells you that the teachers are a lot more comfortable. I haven't seen any. I am not saying that there are not little things being done. We heard about, my colleague here mentioned the sanitizers and a few things here and there. But if you still have work going on at schools now, where teachers are supposed to come in and get an environment that is ready, the physical plant is ready, I mean, what about the other issues that they have to deal with? So I'm very concerned about the conditions that the teachers have to operate under, both physical and in terms of the resources that are available to them.
Thank you, Senator. And as you touched on about the physical plants, we recognize that some schools, again, this year, despite the closure of schools in March, they were still not prepared for the opening of schools. We know for sure the Entrepot School, Les Etangs, there was still work undergoing at these schools. I mean, how, as a government, do you carry on like this? You know, lack of resources for teachers. We know that they stopped their principal assistants, so there's not even that assistance to teachers or principals. We saw some recommendations coming from the opposition, the political leader. Do you think, Dr. Antoine, and you just having left the service, would that have been some sort of assistance that would have been welcomed in schools at this point?
Certainly, because I should tell you that we spoke about office assistant, that some of the principals told me that they are still tired, that they have to come in at the reopening of school but they're still tired because there is so much work happening at their schools. There are some schools that are open, and plumbing work is still going on in the schools, and electrical work is still going on in the school. So it is more complicated than we think right here. So I believe that we have to take seriously the recommendation that we should give. In fact, one of the recommendations is to use the money, the IMF monies, to assist parents with the school supplies for their children. We still have children who came to school without their supplies. In fact, you may not know, but the feeding program at the schools in this COVID time, the principals were asked to finance the feeding program for the month of September.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, they have to finance for the month of, so they have to find money, they have to find resources to feed the children.
But isn't that, if I can ask, wasn't that the announcement made that the feeding program had been, the subsidized feeding program had been doubled, and that there was an increase in the resources for school feeding? Because if that was the case, why would principals have to take on the responsibility of having to find, to deal with that, even if it's for 1 week?
This is not all principals had to do. I know a principal who personally got resources to fix the home ec room, to build cupboards and to fix the sinks, so that the children, we have to commend the principals tremendously for the effort they are putting their life into into the schools to ensure that the children are fed, the children are safe, because the bins were given for hand washing. The principals had to erect that themselves. They had to find the resources, and I stood watching principals and the people they had hired to do it for them. And in some cases, parents who came to do self-help working at the school. So the principals are doing a tremendous job at the school in ensuring that our children, because mine is involved, our children were back at school and our children were in a safe environment, in as much as the resources were so limited. So I'm wondering, as you said before, where is the government in all of this to recognize that the schools need the resources, and not just to say that we are giving resources and to give a box with a few hand sanitizers and two jerry cans of bleach, but to give adequate resources, because with the constant sanitizing, you need a lot more resources.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, I don't know, as a former principal, we must appreciate the fact that principals are expected to be good managers. And sometimes you have to improvise. I believe it's quite okay if a principal can take on an initiative and source whatever is required. But there must be some, matching of that, or some kind of incentive. Because if principals who are innovative, forward thinking, and want to, make a move, get a sponsor to get something done, is doing that, that's wonderful. However, in a public school, you expect that your efforts will be encouraged when the government steps in and does something. And this, for all the times that we've felt that the government had dropped the ball regarding getting the right allocation and prioritizing education, one would have thought that post-COVID, that was a great opportunity for the government to demonstrate that and ensure that from the 75 or 70 whatever million dollars secured from the IMF,
yes,
that instead of receiving roads and all those things being used, money's being allocated to doing that, that priority would have been given to some of those basic things that we just mentioned, the subsidizing the school feeding. My colleague here mentioned some of the supplies for the schools. The transportation is another one. The transportation system has its challenges. We talked about books and bursaries, but don't forget, you have children going to school now with less students on the bus. While a driver would have had maybe 14, now they have to have that number. So it means that there is room to employ several other drivers who probably have been losing income because of COVID to get on the subsidy program, that's a good time for the government to actually come good on their promise to double the subsidy program. Because Monday, I do not think that since 2016, this subsidy program has been doubled at all. We've been
Yes.
hearing it, and it's time for us to call the government out and say, listen, all you did was to get rid of, or if they want to say, terminate the contracts of the Labour Party supporters, or perceived Labour Party drivers. I've said it before, and replace them with UWPs. But the numbers, I don't believe that there's any evidence that has suggested that there has been an increase. This is an opportunity where the government could have said, listen, since we have, we need more drivers because we have to get children to school in smaller numbers. That means if you needed one bus for 14, now you need 2 buses for 14. Get more drivers on the road.
Yeah, and this government is really economical with the truth, because we see a big promotion about doubling a feeding program and doubled the
haven't bought that at
transportation
all.
subsidy.
I don't know
But
if-
it
I don't know
is
if it's
not
of
true.
Virginia has.
It is not
I haven't bought
true.
that.
I want to interject here and indicate that when I sit and I see government in Parliament borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars, as far as I'm concerned, the priority should be education. Right now, I see education basically on a go slow, and we have almost postponed the future of the next generation.
Yes.
And we should make no apologies for that. If government borrowed money, that money government borrowed should go priority education, to put money in the people's pockets so that they can put food on the table, so that they can pay for their bills, they can take care of their health. That is priority number 1 for the St.
Right,
Lucian
human
people.
resource.
Yes.
And I don't want to see government going, and these are the people, the future generation, they are the ones who will be paying these loans.
Yes.
And you have to invest that money in them. We cannot see government borrowing that kind of money. There is need for roads, but roads are not the priority now. We are actually on a rescue mission in the time of COVID,
Yes.
and we cannot postpone the future of the next generation. And as an educator, having involved in teaching and learning for all my life, I make no apologies for that. I do not excuse any government for setting wrong priority when it comes to education. And as far as I'm concerned, this slow motion, this slow thing, as though, imagine children went to write Common Entrance and CXC, and they were shortchanged in the instruction. You understand? Because the children didn't have the full year in instruction. So when are they going to get that? Instructional time is critical. And with COVID, we have to make do. What will happen to the next generation?
Yes.
There's a critical point that Dr. Poyet just raised. Instructional time. I touched on it earlier. Let's just take 1 term, or even a semester, if you like, for the post-secondary. If there are 13 weeks in the school term, the longest term, and you would have covered, let's say, in your 7-day cycle, you would have covered, say, 3 cycles or 4 cycles. Under this current environment, in this current environment, you would probably cover 2 cycles. That means you have severely compromised the amount of instructional time that you have available to the teachers and the students. Granted, you might want to use the virtual learning, which we know has been severely compromised with the absence of laptops. Nobody is going to pretend that when the permanent secretary asked for the assistance of persons bringing in used laptops, that she was joking. She was serious. She knew it was important. And as I said before, we can't blame her for that. But if the virtual learning was supposed to help to back up the time that is lost during school, that instructional time that Dr. Albert Poyet spoke about is now even more seriously affected because of the limitations the students have with the tools, the gadgets to do the work at home. I mean, my children come home and they talk about they have something to do on Google Classroom. Fortunately, they have tablets, and I'm home, I'm an educator, I can assist them. The typical average St. Lucian child does not have that available to them right now, and so the playing field is not level.
Yes.
There is no equity. You're already losing half of the instructional time. You lost some time between March because of COVID and Common Entrance. These children are now going to Form 1, and you're getting half the attention that they need. So when they get to Form 2, after, let us suppose this goes on for another few months, when are you going to make up for that?
But we're talking...
Did I hear you say you cannot blame who for that?
I'm saying when the permanent secretary and the chief education officer made a call, I repeat, made a call or an appeal to ask parents who had used laptops to make them available, I was not going to hold them responsible for making the appeal. I think the intention was to get the tools. I believe, and I did, the last time I commented on that, I said that the Minister for Education and the government, the policymakers, have to be the ones to take the blame for having the technocrats having to come to us and ask for a little bit of help with something that was a priority when
I understand that
the
point,
previous government was in office.
But the person who is articulating that on behalf of the minister had to think twice before you make that statement. I make no apologies for these agents of those type of practices. You understand?
I had a bit of empathy for them, but I suppose not everybody
our children
will.
are the ones paying the price.
That is true.
It is really sad that we have some children at secondary school where you have the majority of the students may have a device and they don't have. So these children are at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's not equitable.
And there's a young boy at St. Mary's College who was a victim to that. He wasn't able to follow with the others because he was the only one who was missing a device in the class. And while we're speaking about devices, we have to think of social distancing at the school. There are some schools that still don't have adequate furniture. In week 2, a principal told me she was asked to go to Suffolk Comprehensive to pick up furniture to take to Salty Bath.
Oh. But there's this argument about, I know there's a heavy focus on instructional time, but the school feeding program, I know for a fact that sometimes that meal was the only meal for some children. How do you balance now the priority? And again, well, there's no balance because it's not being done between instructional time and really providing that basic nutrition for children. You know, the nexus between agriculture. We have so many farmers right now who cannot sell their produce. Why is the government not taking that produce and ensuring that at least every student, if needs be, has one nutritional meal a day? These are issues which are going. How can a child learn when you're thinking of your hungry belly? I mean, these I hear the argument for instructional time, but let's face the facts. Thousands of St. Lucians are unemployed.
Yeah.
You cannot learn on a hungry belly.
Right, but I think we can take the issue to one level up. In that we are looking at the issue of, if you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals,
yes,
the one which features highly internationally is inequality. And if we address the issue of inequality, it will take care of hunger,
yes,
it will take care of poverty, it will take care of quality education. We are educators here, and we are talking about quality education. And we know what education has done for the poor.
yes.
A lot of people who are poor, because their children got an opportunity to go to school, they got educated, these children were able to move up the social ladder. They were able to come back and support their parents. And because of the importance that education played in the lives of so many people in our society and beyond, we cannot compromise education. All right? And when we look at inequality in our society, to me, the COVID period actually widened the gap.
It is proven.
Yes.
People who are poor got poorer, and those who are richer got richer. How are we going to close that gap?
Yes, I mean.
And this is something I'm very concerned about, and it is reflected. The other issue is when you look at the school is a microcosm of the society. It's a reflection of what happens in the society. And United Nations and these organizations believe in the school as the place where you can see greater equity. the teachers, there's a greater guarantee that if the food comes to the school, the teachers will feed the children.
Yes.
If the books come there, they will give them. If they are sick, if you put it in some other sources, you are not guaranteed that it will reach the target.
Therein lies one of my concerns. I remembered some years ago, that when students needed to be placed on a government-subsidized bus, the school was asked to submit the names of the children who are obviously, the teachers would know, who are struggling, who are unable to meet certain commitments. And the school, through its staff and the welfare and the counselor, was the entity that made the recommendation. What I've noticed now is that you even people it's happening the other way around. You have politicians recommending names of students to schools to be placed on bus subsidy because a certain family is linked with them. That is an issue where you are interfering with the ability of the school to provide fair and equitable and service to students. The same for the school feeding. If you place the resources in the schools, and I want to put a plug for principals. Principals, by and large, are generally good managers. They have to manage people, the human resource in the school, the teachers and the employers, employees of the Ministry of Education and the ancillary staff. They have to manage the resources, the money, and everything. When people are on vacation, principals have to come to the school during the hurricane season. They are shelter managers, right?
And they know how to stretch the resources.
So if there is, and I think the Labour Party in government can safely say that they will be pro principals having some kind of latitude in managing resources. Think about the amount of money that is being spent to repair a door or window at a school when contractors come in with all those. A principal can get that done with 1/10 of the resources.
Right, because there's no corruption. There's no corruption in the school.
principal can install 5 doors with the money that they install one
you
door.
look at your facilities fees that the parents are paying for, which is a meager percentage of what the government can give to you. And you can see the kinds of things that school principals, teachers, and staff can get done with that. I think that we need to move in the direction of making school principals managers and letting them perform that role, and allowing the school to be more autonomous in the way it manages resources. We must not treat them like a minister suggested that we treat farmers and think that they can't manage money when we put it in their hands. Once there's accountability and transparency and mechanisms for that, we should allow that to happen.
On that note, we are due for our first break. So we will come back and we'll start back on the issue of facility fees, because that has been a big topic. So St. Lucia, join us after the break as we continue our discussion on education, especially in this COVID era. We'll be back. Welcome back, viewers. And with me tonight on SLP Town Hall Tuesday again, we have Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot, the endorsed candidate for Babonneau. Next to her, we have Senator Gideon Ferdinand, the endorsed candidate for Micoud South. And right next to me, we have Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper, the endorsed candidate for Choiseul Saltibus. So we've been having a really lively debate about education in St. Lucia, especially in this COVID era. We've touched on the biggest lie, well, I don't even know if it's the biggest lie, but a big bluff from the government of doubling the school feeding program and the transportation subsidy. We know that to be not true, but we really hope that the government can do better, because again, our children's future is at stake. We've spoken about just the ill-preparedness of schools once again, and I don't know how many times that this has happened, but once again, our schools are not prepared physically, the plant, to welcome our children for the 2020-2021 academic year. We'll go into another phase of our discussion. we've been talking about really the inequalities of education and how COVID-19 has literally accelerated the shift for a digital, technologically driven education system. And I dare say that this government has taken us a few years back by discontinuing the laptop program for students. I've been reviewing some of just articles, and every year there would be a donation from a friendly government of thousands of laptops for our students. And right now, to see the public outcry, I think all of you are probably inundated by requests from your constituents for these devices. And, you know, it just, again, is very striking, the difference in the policies of the two governments. Why would you believe that giving a child a laptop is what? You can't eat that? You can't eat a laptop?
Yeah, but Monday I made a very, very basic analogy on this laptop program. And I saw it as one where the Labour Party saw the need for us to go into the technological era. And therefore they purchased the laptop.
Yes.
And then you train the teachers to use the laptop and to teach the children. The United Workers' Party came in and they removed the laptop. And they said they are going to train the teachers. Now, if you are teaching somebody to drive, the first thing you need to have is the vehicle. And then you put the person inside of the vehicle to learn to drive. They remove the vehicle and then they are teaching you to drive. With what? You understand? So this does not make sense.
Theory? I don't know.
Okay, so I'm telling you that the device was there. The plan was to ensure that every single child had a laptop, and then you train the teachers, and the teachers actually train the children using the laptop. We heard the story of e-books. What has happened to the e-books?
Yes.
Huh? This time of COVID, that's the time the parents should not have bought any books. Now they have laptop on the book list when they are unemployed.
Yes.
Parents, both parents sometimes, mother, father, unemployed, they are asking them to go and buy laptop now. This is ridiculous. And I'm telling you, if we are sensitive to the children's education, you look at the policies of the St. Lucia Labour Party, which was very clear. Labour Party came in with universal secondary education, where they gave every single child an opportunity.
Yes.
They actually put in that $500 bursary for children who succeeded to go into secondary school. They were preparing now to pay CXC for students. And they built so many schools in St. Lucia. All the United Workers' Party had to do was to just do a little maintenance, a little painting, a little something. And that they cannot even do before school reopened.
Yes.
Amandi, there's another dimension to the comment you made when we came back on set, and that was with the ridiculing of the laptop, so to speak. It is interesting to note that the very same government that ridiculed the laptop, people don't eat it and so on, whatever. Can you imagine that it has now become a luxury for some?
Yes.
Now, this is a fundamental difference between the Labour Party that I sit here to represent and the government that we have in office. Things that we believe should be equitable and should allow for, as we say, equalizing the inequalities that exist in society to bring everybody up to a standard that they can be competitive. The government is making things look like some people are entitled to and some are not. I'll give you an example. The first Friday after school reopened in this academic year, our Prime Minister was in my community giving tablets to the top 7 students who succeeded the common entrance exam from each of the primary schools. Let's analyze
So what happened to the bottom?
Let's analyze what is the message you're communicating to the children of St. Lucia. That for you to be able to access devices, that you have to be the top of your class. So you must only aspire, only a few will get it. And that is fundamentally the difference between what the Labour Party has been doing and what the United Workers' Party is doing. I don't really like to discuss parties when I talk on issues, but this is one that I had to bring up because you're telling me that 7 students from one school are entitled because they got the top mark. This takes us back to what used to happen before universal secondary education.
Yes.
You get a score, you pass. You didn't get a certain score, you fail. And so you're labeled. You cannot aspire. But when you bring in universal secondary education, every single child has an opportunity to get to a secondary education. A laptop was for every single child.
Yes.
You cannot now ridicule it and come back and offer, and you're taking photos with the children and putting it on your Facebook page.
PR stunts.
And only 7 children. So the 8th and 9th and 10th child who may have missed a mark, half a mark, cannot get access to that device while a few can get it. And that is essentially the issue. It's not about a privilege. Education is not a privilege. It's a right. And I'm sure Dr. Poyet has alluded to that with the Conventions on the Rights of a Child and some of those other United Nations resolutions. You cannot treat education as if it's a privilege. It's for only a few.
In fact, a device is now an educational tool. This is not a luxury.
No.
And this is what we have to understand, that every child now needs a device, and we have to provide a device to the children. So it's not the top. Sometimes the children who are struggling learners are able to learn a lot better using the device.
But not only that, Dr. Antoine, my child, whose parents are better able to afford a tablet because they would be at the top of their class, will be given a tablet.
Yes.
And probably they already have a tablet.
Whose parents may already have those devices, are offered one, and another person's child who may have been the 10th place in the class, who has no food on the table and who really needs that, can't get it. And that's where I think the point was made earlier by Dr. Poyet. You continue to extend the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
I'm very passionate about education because of my own personal experience. I went to school in Babonneau. I was placed in a C class because they were labeling them A, B, C. I remember when my mother was in school, she said her class, they used to call it rubbish. They used to call her class rubbish. Imagine you labeling children as rubbish in those days. And I never got an opportunity to go to a secondary school. I'm not ashamed to say that, because there were not enough secondary schools to go to. So I started teaching. And I taught. I became a teacher. I went to Teachers Training Center. I went to Teachers College. I did my first degree. I was among the first group of students who started the B.Ed program in St. Lucia at the Sir Arthur in collaboration with K-Ville. I did my master's, and I went on to do my doctorate. So I am I want to inspire young people so that they see the sky as the limit. There's nothing that should stand in their way in terms of educating themselves and developing themselves. And every time I see somebody try to disadvantage a child, prevent that child from getting that opportunity to learn, I feel very passionate about it.
But Dr. Poyet, this again speaks to the difference in the policies of the two parties. For me, I always believe that a Labour Party is aspirational. It is the party that takes someone, and I don't understand right now in this country that we don't want to talk about the issues. We don't want to talk about the real issues in front of us, the poverty that is glaring, that a lot of people have literally made poor in this country, especially during COVID. And a Labour Party, when I say aspirational, a Labour Party government has been the government to educate the most teachers, the most engineers, the most accountants, the most doctors and nurses with our relationship with Cuba. Had it not been for these kinds of relationships and incentives, we built an entire middle class, which is what I know that is strikingly different from the two parties. And, we listen to the political leader, and he speaks about one university grad per household. I would dare say one professional graduate per household, because we know that skills is a big thing in the economy right now. Tradespeople, and they get paid a lot of money internationally. We're really building global citizens, and I just think it's an indictment on this government that everything just has to stop.
Well, one day you would realize, if you think of the past, that it was only the elite
Yes.
who would get scholarships to study. And it was the Labour Party that started the B.Ed program and started fetching people like me
And
from
myself.
the rural community,
And myself.
Senator
Very
Gideon
nice.
from the rural communities, and
Access.
gave us scholarships so that we could do our first degree. And I'm sure that a lot of teachers, a lot of the people from the middle class can identify with this. Or else we would have been in the dungeon, and only the children of the elite. If you didn't have a certain name,
Fat
you wouldn't
mortgage.
get a scholarship.
Yes.
Yes.
You know?
And I recall when I was president of the Teachers Union, I brought in the program with the Sheffield University,
Yes.
and that afforded over hundreds of teachers in St. Lucia to get their masters. And they were able to move up the ranks, become principals, become education officers, and so on. That opened the door for them. And we actually saw the education system moving up the ranks, because if your teachers are trained, they are going to deliver better quality instruction in schools. So this business of keeping people behind and playing what we call in Creole the T-boutique type of education, we have to stop this thing.
Okay, and you know, Dr. Poyet, you spoke about the stagnation in just education in St. Lucia, and I don't even believe that it's stagnation. I think we've been pushed some years back, because when you had programs and policies which changed people's lives, I just think, again, we cannot continue like this. And the Labour Party government, I know, has promised that we will do more and we will do differently. We've built the number of schools, so we already have universal primary education, we have universal secondary education. We have not made any gains, and it was a Labour Party government's intention to have universal early childhood education, and that is something that we haven't touched on at all, and we know the cost.
Well, I think
Yes.
Labour Party has done a disservice to itself by not taking ownership for the things that it has
Yes,
done
you
in this
are true.
country. I think we are not being fair to ourselves.
Yes.
And we need to articulate that very clearly in St. Lucia.
Yes. Okay, St. Lucia, again, we have been speaking about education and really juxtaposing the policies of the two parties. A St. Lucia Labour Party, again, for the people, of the people, and who have built this middle class in St. Lucia. And really, I think it's a sad state of affairs if we continue along this vein. But when we come back from our break, we will get into some calls with our panel. Really excellent discussion. St. Lucia, please stay tuned. Welcome back, St. Lucia, to SLP Town Hall Tuesday. Again, you know, this discussion on education is very timely, and the Labour Party has made the right decision with our three candidates, three educators who really can represent us anywhere in the world. You have, you know, Dr. Poyot, veteran educator and representative for teachers, who is going to, you know, I heard your opponent is busy in a rum shop tonight. Whilst you are here,
So is
you know,
mine.
really educating. So is
Mine
yours.
is in teaching
And,
in a rum
and
shop
Miku South, I
in
mean,
Russia.
really,
Yeah, so is mine.
you have a choice between Senator Gideon Ferdinand and your current representative. The choice is clear. I mean, articulate honest, no fluff, no bluff, of the people, can understand the people. This is your representative for Micoud South. And we have Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper, another educator. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do for the Ministry of Education once we form the next government. We have...
No cluster.
Exactly, yeah, no clusters. But we have, again, you know, the substance of government is on this side. It is with the St. Lucia Labour Party. And I know that we can really get this country back on the path of growth and inclusion with our people, putting people first. And that is really what we're about in the St. Lucia Labour Party. Once I touched on inclusion, you know, there have been discussions, I saw very animated discussions on Facebook about an inclusive, and we speak about inclusive societies, but that has to start again in the schools. And Dr. Antoine, I don't know, again, since you were probably one of the last in the education system, what is your opinion on how we include all children in our education system?
Well, presently the system is I mean, the pattern is segregation. You have the special ed, you have the school for the blind, and so on. We have children with disabilities, very intelligent children, who do not have access to the school buildings that we have. We have children who are on wheelchairs who cannot access the classrooms. They cannot access the washrooms. I mean, this is supposed to be a modern era. It is supposed to be an era of modern pedagogy. It is supposed to be an era of inclusion, where we must cater for every child. Gone are the days when we kept children who had disabilities in a corner at home. Now we have realized that children with disabilities can be taught and become very useful adults. And sometimes they are more productive than some of the people we call normal in society. And therefore, we must ensure that we make provision for these children in the school system. In some cases, we do not even have a ramp for a wheelchair. We have children with autism, and we don't cater for them. It is rather unfortunate. I think some of us have to think of ourselves as a parent of one of those children, and how would we feel, you know, at the treatment that some of these children, the stresses that they have to go through in the system in addition to their disabilities. It is very unfair, and it is time that we embrace inclusion in our school system. We look at the skills of the children that we have. We don't look at every child as an academic. We have children who are artists. We have children, in fact, all the various arts. And so we have to start teaching STEM education. Science, technology, electronics, mathematics, and the arts. These should be our concentration in the school system. So any child would be able to fit in one of these dimensions and become very productive citizens.
Yes, and Dr. Antoine, it's good that you spoke about inclusion, because we know that a promise of the St. Lucia Labour Party was that there would be early testing, hearing, sight, vision, because these things, once you attack these problems early, they can be, a lot of them can be treated. So I know that this is a policy of the St. Lucia Labour Party when we form the next government. Dr. Ferdinand, Senator Ferdinand, I know that...
Before he goes in, not just treated, but the accommodation would be made for those children.
Yes. Senator Ferdinand, I know that you have been working. I know people speak about what are the St. Lucia Labour Party's policies. I know that you have been working to develop the education sector as part of our manifesto. Can you speak to some of the things that you believe will be addressed when the St. Lucia Labour Party forms the next government at the upcoming general elections? Okay,
before I actually answer that, one of the things I wanted to mention was that the idea of dealing with some of the issues that Dr. Antoine raised, for example, early testing and screening, that was actually something that I recall doing as far back as 2006, 2004, 2006, when I remember the government, a Labour Party government it was, I think it was before 2004, introduced the IOB training for principals. And I attended that training as a teacher at my school, and it basically helped teachers, principals, and to run a school more like a manager. And one of the initiatives that came out of that training was that some of the schools took up the responsibility to ensure that all kindergartens coming in was screened for hearing and visual and so on. And I remember I was then at the Blusher Combined School. We did that, and it was a tremendous experience. It really helped to almost highlight some of the issues that you were going to deal with, and to also put measures in place to mitigate against them. So to get to your question, a Labour Party is not going to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
There are the basic infrastructure for quality education in St. Lucia is actually already in place. And I must say that from 1997, the Labour Party did an awesome job in ensuring that a lot of the infrastructure was there, both physical and otherwise. What education is supposed to do for us as a Labour Party is really to give a St. Lucian child an experience that is equitable. And I think that's one of the key words I've repeated several times. It really needs to speak to the core principles that the Labour Party stands for, and that's bread, freedom, and justice. It is actually supposed to allow a child to be able to develop and achieve their full potential. And what are the things that you can do to ensure that the child can achieve their full potential? Bread, bread speaks to your basic needs.
Yes.
If you have to be liberated as a person through education, it has to allow you to be able to cater for your basic needs. Freedom, justice, freedom. Let's take freedom. Freedom of your mind. That is one of the things that we've heard a discussion about introducing history.
Yes.
St. Lucian history in our schools. To be able to understand who you are. To be able to liberate yourself from all types of, Bob Marley spoke about mental slavery, for all types of oppression. Education does that. And justice, so that everybody gets a fair share of the pie, so that you become equal to any other citizen, a Caribbean citizen, a global citizen. The St. Lucia Labour Party's vision for education is centered around those three core principles. And if we are allowed to continue what we started back in 1997, I am sure that within the next decade, we will see a great shift from where we are today to where we will be. Because we have embraced the idea of ICT, and Dr. Antoine just gave you the acronyms of another schema. One of the schema. We have understood that education is not for today, it's for the future. We understood that way back when we introduced the laptop program, that we understood how children can be empowered, making the world smaller by access, full Wi-Fi in the entire country. Dr.
Yes, which
Jimmy
we
Fletcher,
did start with the GNET program.
The GNET program was supposed to do that. So we were on course.
Yes.
And now you hear people talking about stuff in the cloud as if it's new. The Labour Party was way ahead of that.
Yes.
And so I think our philosophy, our vision for education is centered around the core principles that the party believes in. That every child in St. Lucia can become an ideal Caribbean person, an ideal global citizen, well-rounded, and can be liberated, can be on par with any other person, whether you come from a rich, middle class, or poor family. Mm-hmm. And that is essentially where we differ. In that we believe that if you provide the access that Dr. Poyet was speaking about, from kindergarten all the way up to tertiary education, to bring in the one graduate per household that the political leader has spoken about and you've explained, to ensure that universal secondary and primary education is really universal secondary education, I am sure that we will see the neutralization of, if we call it, the leveling of the playing field in terms of where our average St. Lucian child can get to. So that every child who goes to school and is educated in our system feels that they have a chance, they have a fair chance, they can aspire to be where anybody else can be.
Yes. So
Well,
you,
I just want to add,
is well articulated in the education plan for 2015, 2020 that was laid out by the Labour Party.
Excellent.
So if we go through, we will notice that this vision was there.
Excellent.
Yes. I think I'm very concerned about the status, the situation that Sir Arthur Rees Community College is in right now. And
I think we need a whole program for that, though.
no,
but
I mean, Labour Party
I
has to
agree.
put it on the
Yes, I agree.
on the front burner. In that we have a Nobel Prize winner,
Yes.
and we have an institution named after him, and I don't like the way that institution is being treated. It's a lack of respect for our Nobel Prize winner. The same thing applied to Derek Walcott,
Yes,
with the little place that
his
we
house is
organized
closed.
there. So it looks like St. Lucians or the government of St. Lucia do not value education. And there was this work going on this university college. I sat on that committee for 2 years trying to put that concept together, and I have heard nothing about it. We completed the exercise. They brought some gentleman from a university from overseas to come and share that. There was this principal, Sir Arthur, who came from the Bahamas, and that was the assignment she was given. And that has just died.
Yeah.
One of the things I think Labour Party need to focus on, one of my major concerns, is the transition from secondary school to the world of work.
Okay. We have a caller. We'll take our first caller for this evening. Hello, good night.
Yes, good evening.
Yes.
Great discussion, I must say.
Thank you.
And in my opinion, we are looking at Dr. Virginia Albert Poyet as our next Minister of Education.
The prerogative of the Prime Minister.
I know, but this lady, to be honest with you, she's made such a great contribution in the field of education. I think she still has some more to do, and as Minister of Education, I think she can do that. But this is my opinion. I must say that Senator Gideon Ferdinand, I mean, I never knew him to be, I mean, I see him around the place, but now I'm hearing him, and this man has something to say. You know, I thought of him as somebody who was not an outspoken person, but there I'm hearing him tonight. He's able to articulate his point. And I must say, congrats, bro, and I'm hoping this time you'll be able to deliver this seat to the St. Lucia Labour Party.
Indeed.
And Dr. Poyet, not Dr. Poyet, Dr. Antoine, let me congratulate you as being the nominee for the St. Lucia Labour Party in Choiseul. I'm from Grizzly, but I'm wishing you all the best, and I'm looking forward in. You know, but here's the thing, my concern tonight is, I remember back then my mom, she did what you call the adult literacy program, and that's how she was able to learn to write.
Wow. Yes,
she was
I
able to
remember
learn
those
to
things.
write. Yes, and then take. But I still believe we have some people around. So my question tonight is, where are we now? Is it still going on? And if it's not going on, can anybody on the panel share any light as far as that is concerned? Is it something that they can look into? Because I remember she used to be in Barbados and she used to write to us in St. Lucia, and it was because of that. Because I remember night after night she would go to that school, and you know, she was able to help herself, and as a result of that, she was able to read things for herself. And even when she traveled, you know, she did not need anybody to fill out any form for her or anything along that line. So the question really is, if it's not on something that's going on right now, is it something that the SLP can look into for, well, not my mom because she's no longer alive, but for other, you know, senior citizens who would love to have an opportunity like this? Thanks, I'll be listening off.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for your contribution. Does anyone know?
Well, I was involved in the adult literacy program. We had 2 pilot projects, one in Babono and the other one in Richfond, and one in Tiroche, Miku. We had 3 of them. And we were actually teaching the adults to read and write. And I think we still have quite a number of persons who are illiterate in St. Lucia, and we take it for granted. And we feed them with a lot of things, and these people, they cannot read. Sometimes they have difficulty with the English. And I feel sorry for these people. That they,
So
they
you
don't
think it's
understand
something
what's happening in the
worthwhile and
world.
not a
So
Labour
with
Party?
technology, I think we can even expedite it, and we should really push the adult literacy
I think what
program.
happened is in place of the adult education program, the NELU program
NELU,
was
yeah.
introduced,
Okay.
where people learn different skills.
We have a
But
second
we
call.
have to find out whether there's a need so that we can address it.
Good night, caller.
Yes, good night, everyone. Very,
Good
very
night.
good discussion. I want to commend you
Thank you.
on a very, very good, interesting discussion. I have so many questions. I think you would need to have a show maybe for about 2 or 3 more hours. But I wanted to touch on a couple points that were made by the panel, especially Dr. Poyot, who brought up the issue of digitization in our education system and the whole issue of the laptop to child. I believe that we're still missing some parts of the importance of a laptop to a child. Because while we're talking about a laptop in the context of education, we should recognize that given the level of poverty that we have, and given some of the levels of our families, many families cannot afford a laptop. But the government of St. Lucia is going into digitizing government services. So that laptop, which is given to a child for education, can be used by the family to tap government services. Now you can apply for a driver's license online. But if you do not have the devices to be able to gain access to these services, these online services, then we're missing the point. So in as much as the laptop is important for the education of the children, we also need to see the spill-off effect that it would have on a family who will be able to tap government services by purchasing online. I mean, that's where the world is going. The second issue has to do with lessons from COVID. Have we been able to look at the effects that we've had from COVID-19, from the pandemic, and start making recommendations or start looking at what our world will be tomorrow? Sorry, but I cannot look at education the same way I saw it 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I believe COVID-19 has shown us that chalk and talk is not enough. We are moving into a new world. We are moving into a new economy. I like the issue of the youth economy, and I want to hear the views of the panel on the education system of tomorrow. Are we going to maintain a homogeneous education system where we believe that you can have 30 children in a class and you teach all of them in the same way? I heard Dr. Antoine talking about an education of inclusion, and I would like to hear a little more of that. And lastly, we're talking about facilities fees, and I kind of cringe when I hear a discussion on facilities fees. Are facilities fees legitimized? In other words, is there a legal authority for collecting facilities fees? I believe this is dangerous. We are just just going into something that is illegal, is illegally collected. What will a Labour Party government do to legitimize or legalize or whatever it is, to put a legal framework in place to deal with facilities fees? Because you have schools making up their fees. They determine how much they want. They collect it. Is there accountability for the fees? You know, what is happening? I think for good governance, there must be the proper legal framework for collecting revenue on behalf of the government, and there must be the equal accountability and auditing of these fees in our schools. I will listen to you offline.
Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. So we have
Monday, I think I'll go on the first
yeah,
one.
with the digitization
I'll go on the
of
first
education, and you're going to deal with Dr. the facilities
the
fees. Okay.
I'll try to give a response to the first issue she raised, and that was the importance of the device not only to the child but to the family.
Yes.
That is so true. I remember sitting in the Senate some time ago and having to respond to the leader of government business, trying to make it seem that an excuse for not giving children laptops was because children who had the laptops, their siblings and other members of their family were using the laptops for other purposes. And an example that was given for other purposes was to DJ. Children were having these laptops and using them to DJ. What could be better than a child recognizing that they can use their laptop to download virtual DJ and get into the arts?
Yes, and they were breaking
create
the
music?
codes.
The hidden curriculum.
I mean, when I listened to, and I'm telling you, it was the leader of government business in the Senate making that argument. And that is the issue here. When you have not recognized how powerful a tool something that the Labour Party is doing or was doing is, and then you try to reduce it to what you describe as dangerous because children use it to get into DJ and so. I mean, I couldn't understand. So I'm saying to the caller here that it is very correct that when you give a child a device, you've given a family a device, and it may not even be the child in the classroom who optimizes the potential of that device, but it could be another family member who's able to use it to access
To get the
work.
business online.
Exactly. And so it's the foresight that we had that we have failed to see this government capitalize on. I think my other colleagues would probably
Dr. Antoine, you said you would speak about the facilities fees. I know that we had discussions about that.
I know the facility fees is a hot issue. As a past principal, I can tell you, caller, that it is very difficult and it is very expensive for a principal to run a school. And this is just a way that the parents are assisting the principal in running the school, because the subvention that the Ministry of Education gives in no way can help your child feel comfortable at the school. We have to find additional paper, we have to find additional toilet paper, we have to buy ink, and you name it. Sometimes the school has to help children who are hungry to be fed, to buy additional books for them, to buy shoes, to buy uniform. So you may not know, but the staff and the principal of schools go beyond their call of duty to assist other children. Sometimes in certain schools, in my son's school, the children who did not have bus fare would be given bus fare. And where do the school take those monies? Either from facility fees or from fundraising. The teachers and the principal, the staff, they take time to raise funds to help your children at the school. They do what the government does not do. And so I think as parents, it is important to play a supportive role to the principals and the staff at the school who are doing so much themselves to make your children feel comfortable at the school. So you shouldn't take the little meager, whether you feel it is justified, whether you feel it's legal. I think we should take it in terms of a need, in terms of assistance to the school to help our own children.
But Dr. Anton, does that now speak to the inadequate support that we are not putting our money where our mouth is in terms of education, in terms of educating the global citizens? And that's what I want to call it, because the last question from the caller spoke about the education system for tomorrow. And we realized that COVID-19 has really accelerated that. Some of the things that we thought we couldn't do classes online, Zoom meetings, we have done them for the last 6 months. And this is the new reality. And I just don't want the missed opportunity.
Before I forget, and we should not forget that the teachers are at home using their devices, using their electricity, using the data they are paying for to help to educate our children. This is not paid by the ministry.
Yes.
And we should be mindful of the efforts of the teachers to help the children in our schools.
We have reached a stage where, in fact, in my conversation with teachers, and I told them over the years they have done, to some extent, some disservice to the children, in that they have been asked to teach the curriculum to the child. Now it's the
Teach the
reverse.
child, you teach
You
the
have
child.
to teach the child and not the curriculum. Because with differentiated instruction, you have to focus on the child as a person, and not that I have to teach addition to everybody. Not everybody is ready for that. So you have to look at the child, and then you teach the child what that child needs. And it is a greater challenge for teachers now when you have to teach differentiated instruction.
Dr. Porat, we have a call. Good night, caller.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Mandy. Good evening, and I must congratulate you on doing an excellent job as a moderator tonight.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'd also like to say good evening to Dr. Porat, Dr. Antoine, and Senator Ferdinand.
Good evening, good evening.
Good evening. Greetings from Montreal, Canada.
Oh,
And-
welcome.
And cheers to bread, freedom, and justice. Wow.
Yes.
What an impressive lineup tonight. Some of the things that have struck me the most and will stay with me is one of them actually is mention of inclusion. I remember growing up in St. Lucia, and like everybody rightfully said tonight, there's this air of exclusion for people of lower income brackets and perhaps lower academic performances as well. And I grew up in a UWP constituency, so to speak, a UWP stronghold, although my father's side of the family are very strong Labour supporters. As a matter of fact, my eldest brother and my nephew, my eldest brother was actually an SLP candidate for many, many years. He passed away not too long ago. God bless his soul.
Rest in peace, yes.
What I saw growing up was the UWP candidate's favorite part of the constituency benefited from all the good stuff. And we in Mondador, on many occasions, had to run across to Leclerc to access the basketball court and the football playing field. Many times we were chased off it. Sometimes we got into fights with the guys from Leclerc. And that practice of exclusion is still carrying on today. The UWP government, you can actually say that this is part of their status quo. They're known for that. When you look at the principle and fundamental principles of the SLP, which is bread, freedom, and justice for everybody, you can differentiate between the two parties. You can see the two different mentalities. And I'm very grateful and I'm very excited too with this upcoming election, having heard what the panelists tonight have highlighted and seek to address once you guys are in government. Because I had a conversation with Dr. Hiller a few weeks ago, and I voiced my concerns regarding our preparation for this upcoming election. And he assured me that we're ready. And tonight I can see that we're ready. So all the best to you guys. Thanks. And again, cheers to bread, freedom, and justice.
Thank you,
Thanks for
caller.
your
Thanks for the
contribution.
encouragement.
Yes.
Yes. Again, to the panel, as we will wrap up, because I know we're very short on time, just some closing words with you. And I know, again, education is very dear to everyone. I saw the passion, I heard the passion, but more importantly, I heard the ideas, the intention of all of you in terms of education for our children to create these global citizens. So, Dr. Porat, your closing words for constituents and parents?
Well, my closing word is to embrace the concept of creating a youth economy, which will create opportunities for the young persons, because they have been complaining that not much is done for them. And I'm happy that the Labour Party is actually creating that portfolio and giving them that opportunity that a lot of children, a lot of young people never had. And I'm hoping and praying that we create that kind of opportunity for transition from school to the world of work. Too many of our children are left on their own to fend for themselves, and Labour Party has to address that very seriously.
Thank you, Dr. Poyet. Senator?
For me, it's essentially that we must recognize as a country that education is the great neutralizer. It makes the playing field level. And if we're serious about progress, we're serious about prosperity as a country, as a nation, we must approach education in that way. It must not be the outside child of the government. It must be a priority. It must be demonstrated in the policies of any government that education is on the front burner. We do not, as I said from when we started, we do not have oil. We don't have some of those resources that other countries have. What we have is our human resource. And we must develop the capacity of our human resource to be able to function in this post-COVID environment. And I think our education system must respond to the diverse needs of its people and place St. Lucia on a more competitive path of success.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Dr. Antoine Prosper.
I believe that we live in a global environment, and we should focus on education on a global stage. And within that global stage, we focus on youth, we focus on the disabled, we focus on the vulnerable. So we cater for our our children at the level that they are, so that they can progress from their standpoint. So in other words, we focus on inclusion, and we focus on the opportunities that will present themselves in the future, so that we don't think of today. We are thinking of education for life. We are thinking of education for tomorrow. So we are preparing our children for the world beyond today, beyond the next 10 years. So our students, our children, as they grow, they become part of that global economy, because we're not preparing them for St. Lucia. And we know that we cannot provide jobs for all of them in St. Lucia, and ultimately some of them would be moving into the wider world. So we have to look at education on a broader scale, that we include everybody, and we cater for all of our students in the education system.
Thank you, Dr. Prosper. St. Lucia, if you had any doubt about it, the substance of government is on this side with the St. Lucia Labour Party. Our candidates have articulated, the educational priorities of the St. Lucia Labour Party for their constituents and for St. Lucia. This party has promised to put the people of St. Lucia first, and we make no bones about it. We invest in our people, and that is how we become a nation of wealth and health and great prosperity. So St. Lucia, thank you for joining me, Mondi Lewis, on the SLP Town Hall Tuesday. Next week, Tuesday, we will be in Dennery South with our endorsed candidate, Mr. Alfred Stabach Prosper, that Dozbal in Dennery. So we're looking forward to all of you joining us there. And stay safe, St. Lucia, and we will see you next week with another Town Hall Tuesday. Thank you.